Good.
Good?
Good.
Good. All right. When you're ready, we'll start, which leads us closer to finishing.
Yay. John.
Sean.
Oh, John.
Okay. Today, we are going to continue in affirmation number 1, which is, anybody remember affirmation 1?
Affirmation 1.
Yes. Thank you, Hugo. Yes, Edie.
Accepting other religions.
All right, accepting other religions.
Tri-faith.
Tri-faith is part of that, sure.
Walking in the path of Jesus without denying legitimacy of other paths of God that may provide humanity.
Walking fully in the path of Jesus while, what? Without
denying the legitimacy of other
denying the legitimacy of other faiths. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 faiths tonight, and it happens to be the 3 faiths of the tri-faith, so it'll be really, you guys okay? You gonna...
I am. Not mentally.
Okay, let's check in. Okay, so we'll talk about the 3 faiths of the tri-faith, because that'll be probably the most important faiths that you'll be a part of, and you'll want to know some things about, right? Does anybody know anything about any of the 3 faiths of the tri-faith right now? What do you know?
Let's start things the story of David.
Okay. No, you're reading off my sheet. That would be things I know.
Yeah, crescent stars.
So we're going to talk about these faiths. Ready? Why are they called Abrahamic faiths? Does anybody know the answer to this question? The tri-faith faiths are called the 3 faiths of the Hebrew God, or the 3 Abrahamic faiths. Why would they call it that? Yes?
Is there Abraham?
Yeah, I'll give you a hint on that one. Actually, this isn't that much better of a picture either, because he still looks like Abraham Lincoln.
Knee slapper.
Hey, we're not focusing on Jack today. So,
Wait, why would you ever focus on his face?
does anybody know the guy Abraham?
Yeah.
What do you know about him?
I just know.
You've heard of him? Brayden? Okay. Somebody else? Yeah.
Wasn't he the dad of Cain and Abel?
He was not the dad of Cain and Abel, but he was the dad of Cain. No. Do you know who the dad of Cain and Abel was?
No, I can't think of it. I thought it was
It was Adam. Yep. So Adam's way earlier than Abraham. Are you guys going to follow along at all? No? You? Oh, okay. You're not? Okay.
What?
Abraham was a ways after Adam, and I don't know if you heard about that flood that happened with Noah.
Yeah.
You probably know it because of the movie
Noah's Ark.
Evan Almighty.
Yes, I love that
And
movie. That's the greatest movie ever made. Yes.
but does anybody know what why Abraham would be significant to each of the 3 faiths?
But was he in all 3 of them?
Okay, yeah, basically he started them all, not out of nowhere. So in Genesis, this is kind of a small writing, when Abram, he was called Abram originally, when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will make you exceedingly numerous. Do you know what exceedingly numerous means? Yes?
There's a lot of them.
You have a lot of kids. Which was a kind of a sign of success back then in the old days. Then Abraham fell on his face, and God said to him, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. You may think, you just said that. You repeated yourself, right? Well, a lot of times in the Bible, when something's in there twice, it means like, this is important. Yeah. And if it's in there 3 times, it's like, this is really important. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, which is also kind of like numerous. And I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan. Have you guys ever heard of the Promised Land? Yeah, that's what he's talking about. So, this is the beginning of the relationship between God and Abraham. And so Abraham would be considered, at least here, the father of, which religion?
Judaism.
All of them.
Judaism. And as the story unfolds, Abraham winds up having 2 sons, and they kind of go different ways. And then that becomes the formation of the division between Judaism and Islam. We're not going to get into all that, but that's where that happens. So Isaac kind of carried on the nation of Israel, and Ishmael, have you heard that name?
Is that in Moby Dick?
Kind of went a different way, and basically was the kind of path toward Islam. So, and as you know, of course, Christianity came out of the Jewish religion. So, therefore, Abraham is the father of all 3 faiths. Cool?
Which?
So, which of the 3 is the oldest faith?
Judaism.
Judaism. Very good. As far, and that's probably the oldest religion as far as we know, but I think there are probably other ones in like Mesopotamia and in other places like that. But you are correct. This is the Star of David. It's said that possibly David wore this star on his shield, or some think he even had a shield that was a star, a 6-point star like that. That's different than the 5-point star that we have on our flags, right? And this is actually a newer symbol of Judaism. They've only really been having this as their symbol for the last 200 years. So it's fairly new. This is the older symbol. You know what this is called?
Menorah. It's a menorah.
It's a menorah, which is something that they light at Hanukkah. They light the 7 candles on the 7 days of Hanukkah.
8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
They're on each side, one in the middle.
8 days of Hanukkah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so scratch that last line. But 7's a significant number in Jewish history. It's the number of perfection, so this is the older symbol of Judaism. Any questions? What are the 3 pillars of Judaism? The 3 things, actually, the way they say it, are the 3 things upon which the world stands, which is kind of a cool way of saying these are the important things in Judaism. So the first one is Torah. Does anybody know what Torah is? Yes? The Torah would be a scroll that you would read from in a Jewish synagogue, right? But what is it a writing then? Okay. So it's a writing. Does anybody know where the Torah came from or what kind of writing it is? All right, we'll get to that in a second then. You got an idea? No. Okay. So the second thing is divine service. Now, when this idea came out, they were in a system of sacrifice. So divine service was actually following the sacrificial rituals that are in the Old Testament to be designed to make you acceptable to God. So there are all kinds of different sacrifices that you had to do depending on what happened. Sin offerings, if you did something wrong, you'd offer a bull to be killed and its blood spread across the altar. That's what a sacrifice is. It's an animal sacrifice. They slash it and bleed it, burn it, and then the smoke would go up to God and God would be pleased with the sacrifice.
After my dog.
You sacrificed your dog? Oh, that's bad. Now, no, you don't need to highlight that. So, obviously, they don't do sacrifices anymore. If you go to Temple Israel, you're not going to see a cat or a dog or a bull or a lamb sacrificed on the altar. They don't do that. They haven't even done that for 2,000 years. So what do they do instead of sacrifice now? They pray.
Oh.
So that prayer becomes the sacrifice and the way to do divine service. So divine service is being in communication with God. Do you guys know what acts of kindness are?
Being nice.
Yes, it's what it says, acts of kindness. That's the third emphasis in Judaism, is to do acts of kindness toward other people. Okay, so that's the three things upon which the world stands. So, the Torah is, if you've ever heard of the Ten Commandments, it was the message that God had written on tablets, if you believe the Bible literally, and given to Moses to bring down the mountain. Have you guys ever seen the Ten Commandments movie, Charlton Heston?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And he brings the tablets down the mountain. Well, that's him. That's Charlton Heston. That's not Moses. And he's got the tablets. And so those are the Ten Commandments. And that would be considered the law, or the Torah. So the Torah is actually the first 5 books of the Bible.
The New Testament, the Old Testament.
Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Genesis kind of tells the story of the beginnings and of the first leaders of Judaism. Exodus talks about Moses leading the people out of captivity in Egypt. And then Numbers talks about all the people that were wandering. And then Deuteronomy talks about, it's kind of like Moses, if you think that Moses wrote it, it's like his account of what happened. So you can find the Ten Commandments in both Exodus and in Deuteronomy. So that's the Torah. So to know the Torah is one of the 3 pillars. To know the Torah, to study the Torah. And they have Wednesday night class, just like you do, every week at Temple Israel, where they teach religious education. So they're learning the Torah, and they learn Hebrew. They learn how to read it in its original form. I bet you're glad you don't have to do that.
I know a lot of my friends go to that.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
All right, as we talked about, divine service is praying. Acts of kindness are acts of kindness.
Why is that funny to you?
All right, who is the key person then of Judaism?
Abraham. Abrahamic.
Abraham. He would definitely be considered one of the key people of Judaism. But they also hold one other person pretty high. Moses. Very good. You know, the Exodus, when God heard his people cry and set them free from Egypt, that story is recounted over and over in the Old Testament. There's always a passage throughout the Old Testament where God's saying, remember what I did for you. I got you out of Egypt.
How do you spell Moses?
Let my
M-O-S-E-S.
Boom. Let my
What is the key writing of Judaism? Obviously the Torah that we talked about, but they also believe in the writings of the prophets. So there's numerous writings in the Old Testament called the prophets. And the prophets were people that spoke in a way that was corrective. So they'd be people that would say, hey, we're not living right here. We got to change this. So that's what a prophet does. Do you think they're well liked?
No.
No. Do you like to be told you're wrong?
No.
Yeah. All right, any questions on Judaism? Yeah.
When was it created?
So it depends on your interpretation of when Abraham lived, right?
When did he live?
So possibly like 4,000,
Years ago?
no, like more like 6,000 years ago.
He's old. He's dead.
He's not still alive.
Aw.
But, you know, that's totally debatable because, you know, it would be up to your interpretation of how the Bible was written, how history was written back then. So it's hard to say exactly, but it's pretty old. Any other questions? Okay. Moving along. Which of the three is the youngest faith?
Christianity.
Christianity.
2 for 2.
Islam? Who says Christianity? Raise your hand.
This guy.
Who says Islam? Raise your hand.
I don't know.
Who has no idea? Raise your hand. All right.
Hugo.
Islam is the youngest faith.
I got it wrong.
What? The 2 brothers. What?
Way to go. Way to go. They date Islam starting in 622 CE, and that date is according to the voyage or the pilgrimage of Muhammad to Medina or Yathrib at the time. So there is a thing called the Hijra, or this kind of exodus in its own way, much like the exodus from Egypt for Judaism to the Promised Land. Muhammad took the Muslims from Mecca to Yathrib, or later called Medina, and that became the holy city. And so they mark that as the date of the start of Islam. 622, not that long ago, really. Maybe. Oh, and here's the slide that goes along with that story I just told you. So you can see there the trip from Mecca to Medina. And that's called the Hijra.
Do you know?
And then there's a big song about it called "The Moon Has Risen Over Us," one of the oldest religious songs. And they still sing it today as a tribute to Muhammad coming to Medina. What?
Do you know if Muhammad Ali is Islamic?
Muhammad Ali?
Mm-hmm. Like,
He converted to Islam.
Oh.
A lot of people adopt the name Muhammad, and but Muhammad Ali, his real name was Cassius Clay.
Oh, but he changed it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, he was a boxer, right?
Yeah.
And he changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali when he became Muslim. And I believe he became Muslim because he had a relationship with Malcolm X. That has nothing to do with... All right, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? I gave you hints here. Shahada, Salah, Zakat, Saum, and Hajj. Does anybody know what any of those are? Yeah?
Is it like one of them where you're supposed to like go to Jerusalem and pray? Like that was supposed to be like?
Yes. Not Jerusalem, but Mecca. Yes. Do you know which one that is? Do you want to take a guess?
Pick one, anyone.
I guess. Is it the psalm because it means Saw Mecca because the M stands for Mecca?
Nope.
Dang it.
Actually, Brayden already got it.
Come on, that's a good guess.
One
Ding
of
ding
us
ding.
gets to donate to charity.
Oh, okay. First of all, did you say Hajj?
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. And you said one of them is a donation? Which one? Zakat? Yeah, you're right. That's a donation to charity.
How'd you know that?
Nice.
Oh, Ruth.
Yes?
I don't know, there's a class whose name is Salah.
There's a kid in your class named Salah?
Yeah, he's in my Spanish class. His name's Salah.
Awesome.
Spell his name like
Oh. Maybe you should tell him his name means
Muhammad Salah.
Muhammad Salah?
It's a soccer player. It's a soccer player.
Oh, he's a soccer player, so.
Wow.
Okay. So, Shahada means faith. So, faith in God. Allah. Does anybody know what the word Allah means? Maybe sometimes you hear God and sometimes you hear Allah.
It's like the Islam equivalent to God.
Yeah, it means the God. So, some people think it was unfortunate that they chose a different name for God way back when because it sort of made you think you were thinking about different gods. But Allah just really means the God. So faith in God is important. Salah is prayer. So maybe your friend's name is Muhammad Prayer. You could ask him. And in prayer, they pray 5 times a day. Muhammad first suggested like 15 times a day, but people were like, that's a little much, you know. But now it's 5 times a day. And there's an app for when you're supposed to pray, because it's a different time every day.
Is it like the Remind app?
Yeah, it's kind of like Remind, except it's more like your calendar, it goes off, time to pray. And because it's based on the lunar cycle, it's a different time every day. But they do get together on Fridays for prayer, or people go to their closest mosque on Fridays for the Friday prayer. So, prayer is important. Psalm is fasting. Do you know anybody that's done Ramadan? Well, Ramadan is like a month of fasting during daylight hours. Yes.
Yeah, I have a friend. He like in the spring he can only like start eating at 8:49,
Yeah.
so he can't eat for like the whole day until 8:49.
What would you do in that situation?
Die of starvation.
Or you'd eat a lot
Yeah.
between 8 a.m., 8 p.m. and 8 a.m.
I
Yeah.
have 2 questions. Doesn't that fasting for a month get rid of all your sins for that year?
There is a fast, it's not that one, but it's a different one. It's called the fast of Ashura, I believe, which was a Jewish fast. And it was declared that if you observe that fast, that the Jewish people, it's only a 1 day, then your sins for your last year would be forgiven
Oh wow.
or erased.
And do they have to like pray at school some days because of the lunar or whatever?
I don't know how all that works. We're gonna find out next week. Yeah, that's a good question. Save that one for next week. I mean, I know like people at work, they go pray places, but I don't know about school.
One of my friends, he said that if you drop, this isn't Judaism, but if you drop the Torah, there's like a fast where you either like fast for 20 days or you have 20 people fast with you for 1 day.
Yeah,
I like that.
I'm sure there's a ritual with the book we'll talk about in a second too.
You know, last year was the early pledge to that church. I told the chapel, do they have like Friday nights there, like praying sessions?
At AMI or
Yeah.
Friday, it's like during the day, the noon prayer.
Oh, so people leave work and like go their lunch break. and
Yeah.
everything.
And that's really the time that the community gets together, and not everybody from the community. Edie?
My mom worked with someone who was like fasting during like July, and it was like the longest day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ew. She's like, yeah,
She couldn't eat till like
I
10.
can't like drink any water or anything, right? She's done. Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
No water.
So we have praying, fasting, faith, giving to charity, that's zakat. And then Hajj is the pilgrimage to Mecca once in your life. So, have you ever seen people at the Hajj at Mecca. There's a monument that it said that Abraham and Adam built, and Ishmael, and the people get to Mecca and then they walk around. What do they call that? The Kaaba?
Yeah.
The Kaaba, and they walk around that, and there's all these rituals on the way.
What
It's
is it?
really interesting. Yeah.
But we'll fucking bring, she has a whole presentation on Hajj.
Oh, nice. Okay, so who is the key person of Islam? Anybody?
Andrew Jackson.
Allah, well, that's the God. Muhammad. And this is a calligraphy drawing of the name Muhammad. You're not supposed to ever see an image of Muhammad, so there aren't pictures or paintings, because they feel like people would then worship that painting instead of God. That Muhammad's not supposed to be worshipped, because Muhammad himself said that he is not like God. He's not perfect. He is a very flawed man, he said. So they don't have pictures of Muhammad, but they have writing, and they use calligraphy to write his name in artistic ways. And does anybody know what Muhammad, P-B-U-H, means? Yes, peace be upon him. So whenever you say the name Muhammad, you should also say peace be upon him. And your your Muslim friends would love that if you did that. You know, if anytime you said the name Muhammad, you said peace be upon him. And when you write it, you're supposed to have P-B-U-H after it. Yeah? Yeah?
I have a friend whose name is Mobeen. He goes by his real name is Mohammed.
It is.
Yeah.
But he goes by what?
Mobeen.
Obi?
But if you say his name, so even if you're talking to someone that's not,
No. Only if you're talking about Muhammad. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like Muhammad Ali, peace be upon him.
Wait, but is the writing the thing? Because that's what we learned in school, and I'm like, I don't know if this is true.
Close. The key writing of Islam is the Quran. Quran.
Wrong. Good job, school.
How do you spell that? It's on the board.
Q-U-R-A-N.
When my school is done.
Does anybody know what the word Quran means? Oh, that was a really good try. I mean, that was good. But no, it does not mean that. I mean, I'm not supposed to say no, and you're wrong and stuff like that, but.
You're wrong. It's okay, I still know every day of my life.
You're just not right.
So the Quran, I'll tell you the history of Quran, and then maybe you'll understand or you'll guess the meaning of the word Quran.
Bible.
And that is that in about 610, Muhammad received his first message from God to write the Quran. And it was the angel Gabriel that met him on the mountain of light near Mecca. And the angel said to Muhammad, recite. So what does that mean? That means like write down what I say or say what I say. And so the angel Gabriel gave Muhammad the words to say, and Muhammad wrote them down in what we call the Quran today. And this took place over many years, maybe 30 years.
Wait, how do you?
Does it mean angel book?
Does not mean angel book.
Does it mean recite?
It means recite.
Wow,
Yeah.
I know. I'm writing it. I have 2 right things today, and a lot more wrong. That's cool.
I said that.
So, now there are people that think, and most Muslims think that this literally happened, like that the angel Gabriel literally gave each word to Muhammad, and Muhammad wrote it down literally as the angel said. And one of proofs of that is because Muhammad before that time was illiterate. And so when he wrote all this stuff in the Quran, everybody was like, how did you learn to write like that? Yes, it was the angel Gabriel I was just reciting. So that's something you might hear. There are some people that don't believe that quite that story, because the way we believe about the Bible, people have all kinds of different ideas of how the Bible came around. Some people do believe that God took somebody's hand and wrote the words of the Bible, exactly as they are in the original languages. And then some people think maybe it was like a message through intuition or through your gut, like, hey, write about this. So a lot of Muslims believe that. Any questions so far? Any questions about Islam? Yeah. Since 622. All right. Good question.
What time period was Muhammad alive?
Muhammad was alive 570 till 640, maybe 50. Okay. Moving along. Christianity would probably be dated to somewhere around 0 or 33, depending on how you look at it. The symbols here are a cross. Do you know why a cross would be a symbol of Christianity?
Because Jesus died on the cross.
Jesus died on the cross. Yes. Yeah?
What does the fish mean?
And the fish. What does the fish mean? Anybody know?
Ooh, is it the story with the fish and the bread? Where
The feeding of the 5,000 when... No, it's not about that.
Me?
Yeah?
Okay. So when people used to meet in secret, right? And so people would tell if they were friend or enemy. So people would take a stick or something and then draw a curve in the dirt. And if they were friend, they draw the other curve and it'd be a fish.
That is exactly right.
I remember.
What do you mean?
Jackson, we learned that last year.
Good job. Where did you learn that?
In social studies.
In social studies. Why would it be a secret organization?
Because it wasn't accepted at the time.
Oh yeah. Because in the Roman Empire, they're like, oh, all these Roman gods are right, and then they're like, haha, we like Jesus. And then they're like, oh well, you can't do that, so.
Yeah.
He's just a human.
So Christianity was illegal when it started. Christianity was illegal in the Roman Empire. So it wasn't a matter of belief at the time, it was a little more political than that. So it was, what's that? All right.
Yeah, I did learn that.
You're not supposed to tell them that. Don't.
Okay. What are the main beliefs about Christianity? This is an interesting question. And we'll just run through the main beliefs, and then if you want to ask questions about them or disagree with a couple of them. But the main beliefs are that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. Messiah was the person in Judaism that was going to come to fulfill the nation of Israel, restore political power, bring balance to the force, that kind of thing. So that was called the Messiah. So Christianity's belief is that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus died on the cross for the sins of all people, past, present, future. That's a pretty major belief. Jesus was resurrected from the dead after 3 days on the day called Easter now, which is actually a pagan holiday, but that's what we celebrate.
So it's Christmas.
And yes, so is Christmas. And it is also believed that Jesus ascended into heaven and into the clouds. And so, Jesus is still alive. And Jesus established the church through his disciples. He says to Peter, On you I'm going to build my church, and he calls Peter the rock, and he says, on this rock I'm going to build my church. And personally, I think Jesus was more about reforming Judaism than creating something new. But he does mention that to Peter, that he's going to form his church beginning with Peter. So Peter would be considered the first pope of the church. But the word used for church in that setting is ecclesia, which means community. So it could be that Jesus was talking about something totally different than what we know as the church. Well, I'm sure he was.
Right, so I have a question about stupid actually. You know how people's names is Jesus and Jesus? Is that a way they believe in something? No, that's just.
I think that's just a Spanish name.
I was gonna call kid named Jesus and he got mad at me.
Actually, the name Jesus was it's kind of an English version. Do you care about this answer, even though you brought it up?
Yes.
Okay. So Jesus' real name was Yeshua, which is like a morph of Joshua. Joshua was the one that led the people into the promised land, and he was like a warrior. So Jesus' real name is Yeshua, but we translate it Jesus.
How did Jesus die?
How did Jesus die?
Yeah.
Did you see the third one down?
No, was he hung or?
What?
I'm not asking that.
Why are you picking Jack?
Did Joshua fight the Battle of Jericho?
Do you know that song?
Yeah, that's what we're singing that. Back to love
You're singing it
Jericho. We say that in music, so I was just wondering.
Really? Yeah. He did. He fought the Battle of Jericho.
Jericho. Fought the Battle of Jericho.
Okay. Jesus established the new covenant. So you know how we talked about Abraham had a covenant with God. God said, I'm going to have a covenant with you, and you're going to have many nations and all that stuff. So then there was another covenant made later on through Moses and the law. And that covenant was based on if people behaved well, then God would keep his promise. And the promise was that they could stay in the promised land. So that was the Mosaic covenant, because it was through Moses. And so that one was kind of conditional, right? If you're a good boy, you can stay in the land. If you're a bad boy, you're going to get kicked off the land. And do you know what happened?
A lot of bad boys got kicked off.
According to the scripture, they got kicked off the land.
I'm a good boy.
Because they were not following God. So Jesus came and said, I'm going to give you a new covenant based on the understanding of that old covenant, which was very much about you have to keep the law, otherwise you're done. And so what's the new covenant based on? It's right there. Forgiveness. Love. Jesus said a new covenant is based on love, loving each other. So, forgiveness. Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. So the whole idea of the new law is forgiveness. And that's why when you talk about Jesus on the cross, you're talking about forgiveness. If Jesus died for all the sins of everybody, past, present, and future, then that rule is a rule of forgiveness. Or you can also call it grace. And then, Jesus taught that people need to love God, love others, and love themselves. He says in Matthew, Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Anybody heard that before? You should have.
Yeah.
And then he says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So basically, Jesus brings this new understanding of how to follow God. And that's if you love God, you love others, and you love yourself, then you kind of automatically fulfill all the law. You fulfill all those rules. Because all those rules are about loving God, loving other people, and loving yourself. So, who is the key person of Christianity? Jesus. That's not what Jesus looks like.
Andy. Jesus invented the T-pose.
That is a very, very white Jesus.
You know what Jesus is like?
And there's no way Jesus was white.
I think that Jesus would be a statement that doesn't have a chapter.
Here, this is the Discovery Channel version of Jesus. Based on what people might have looked like in that area, in that day. Which one do you guys think is more believable?
Second one.
That one?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
White clothes.
That one. But it's amazing, isn't it amazing how often Jesus is depicted that way?
Yeah.
Definitely not that way. Yes?
Some people, like in my history class, argue that Jesus could have been a female. Does it like establish a gender in the Bible?
Yes, he could be a girl.
Well, there's a lot of talk of a son.
I think God could be a girl.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of a son. Hey, we're almost done. Hang in there. Oh, okay. Good.
God could be a girl.
Who knows what the key writing? The Bible. Now the Bible includes the Jewish writing, right? The Old Testament, which is the Torah. The first 5 books of the Old Testament is the Torah. And then there's the prophets. And then there's the general writings, right? And then the Bible also adds the New Testament, which the first 4 books are all about Jesus. It's called gospel writing, good news, the good news of Jesus. And it's kind of its own form of writing, its own genre. And so all the first 4 books are all about Jesus' life, ministry, teachings, miracles. Some of them have his birth, some of them have his death. And then there's a bunch of writings by a guy named Paul. And he writes to different churches. And he writes about the churches and how the church developed. And then there's some other letters written by pastors. And then there's this crazy vision that a guy named John had called Revelation, which is probably about the fall of Babylon. And so how was this Bible decided upon? Do you guys know? You know, Braden.
What?
How was the Bible decided upon? Well, there was a big get-together of people in 325 CE, and what? Mostly men, probably white men if there were white men back then. And they decided which writings were going to be in the Bible, and it's been that way ever since. So, yeah, I don't know that they were. If there were white people, they would have the vote, I'm sure. So, what questions do you have about Christianity? Yeah. Okay, so not everybody believes the same thing in Christianity. Like in Islam, there's a little more unity in what they believe, and it's more unusual for people to have a different, more progressive view. But in Christianity, I mean, the beliefs are across the board. So not everybody believes that Jesus was the Messiah in Christianity. Not everybody believes that Jesus even died on the cross. In fact, the Muslims don't believe that Jesus died on the cross, but they do believe that he was resurrected. So that's kind of interesting. Not even everybody believes that Jesus existed. So you have a really wide range of ideas. And one of the concepts is, is Jesus God? And that's another one that people disagree on quite a bit in Christianity. So, there's this freedom to pursue what you think about Christianity and what you believe about those things, and to discuss it with other people or research who wrote about that and what you believe. But it's good things to think about. So probably in this room, there's probably like 20 different versions of what you think it means to be a Christian, right? And what parts of this you believe. And that's, we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks. Question? You have a question?
What's the difference between Catholic and Christian?
Catholic and Protestant.
They're strict.
Catholic is Christian. So there are two branches of Christianity, Catholic and Protestant. So in the 1500s, people rebelled or protested the Catholic Church, and they made other denominations of churches. So they made the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church, Church of England. All these churches were born because they didn't like the Catholic Church anymore. Mostly because the Catholic Church believed that they had authority over people, that the church did. And so they didn't like that. So Protestant churches protest Protestant.
Is Seventh-day Adventist like a Protestant
Yeah.
religion?
Yep, church, Protestant Christian church.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
We go to the Coco room next time.
Can we have a lock-in? Is somebody gonna say lock-in right
Yes.
now?
Yeah!
Get out of
We
here.
need to set up a poll on the website. Everybody votes for the lock-in.
Everybody, it's Alia here. Vote for the lock-in.
If we go in the lock-in, okay. Okay.
Alia here with another amazing video.
I will lock in. If we go in the Coco room, I will look at
Welcome back to ASMR with Weston and Jack. This is ASMR with Weston.
We're just gonna flat out lie.
You're invited to Hugo!
This is ASMR with Weston.
Zooming in on people.
Okay, I'm about to stop the recording, so.
Okay, bye guys. See you next week. I'll be filming next week. You spicy boy. I'll be back. Bye guys.
This has been church today. Okay.